I started my business with almost nothing, just a second-hand laptop, a $200 budget, and a relentless desire to make something of myself. I had always dreamed of running my own company, but when I first began, I had no clue what I was doing. Looking back, I never could have imagined how much it would change my life. It all started in the spring of 2018. I had just finished a stint at a dead-end job that barely paid enough to cover rent, let alone student loans. I had always been a hustler at heart, but the grind of the 9 to 5 routine was wearing me down. Every morning, I'd sit in traffic for an hour, then work in a stuffy office where I felt like a cog in a machine. I knew there had to be more to life than this. One day, while scrolling through Reddit, like I do, I came across a post about starting an online business. I had heard a bit about people making money online, but it seemed too good to be true. The post was about dropshipping, a business model where you sell products online without ever holding inventory yourself. I was intrigued but skeptical. I had no experience in e-commerce, and the thought of running my own store seemed overwhelming. But something clicked in my mind. I wasn't happy with where I was in life, and I wasn't about to sit around waiting for opportunities to fall into my lap. I decided to give it a shot. I spent the next few days researching, reading everything I could about starting an online business. I devoured articles, watched YouTube videos, and joined forums full of entrepreneurs who had made it work. There was one big catch, though. Dropshipping had a lot of competition. I knew that if I was going to stand out, I would have to find a niche, something unique that could capture people's attention. That's when I stumbled upon a market I had never even considered before: pet products. Now, I've always been an animal lover, but I never thought of the pet industry as a viable business opportunity. But after a few hours of digging, I realized that there was a huge demand for pet-related products. People were obsessed with spoiling their pets, and I could see that this was a market ripe for innovation. I spent the next few weeks learning everything about pet products, what was trending, what pet owners loved, and what was missing from the market. I found a few suppliers who offered pet toys, accessories, and gadgets, and I began building my website. I used Shopify to set up my store, and although it wasn't the prettiest thing, it worked. I spent the $200 I had on Facebook ads targeting pet owners in the United States. The first few days were disheartening. I barely got any clicks, let alone sales. I began to doubt myself. Maybe this was a stupid idea. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But then, on the 5th day, I got my first sale. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. I made a total of $15 in profit, and that was the spark I needed. I kept tweaking my ads, experimenting with different pet products, and optimizing my website. Slowly but surely, sales began to trickle in. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. By the end of the first month, I had made about $1,000 in revenue, which was more than I had ever made from my day job. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that things were starting to click. The real breakthrough came about 3 months in. I had managed to grow my Facebook following to a few thousand people, and one of my posts went viral. It was a video of a dog playing with a toy I was selling. The video got shared thousands of times, and my sales skyrocketed. I couldn't keep up with the demand. The orders were pouring in, and I felt a rush I had never experienced before. But with success came new challenges. I realized that dropshipping was not as passive as people made it seem. I had to constantly deal with customer inquiries, handle returns, and monitor inventory. The business was growing faster than I could manage, and I knew I needed help. So, I hired a virtual assistant to handle customer service and started looking into ways to automate my operations. Around this time, I decided to rebrand my store. I wanted it to feel more professional, more polished. I hired a freelance designer to create a new logo and revamp the website. I also started offering new, exclusive pet products that I sourced directly from manufacturers, bypassing dropshipping altogether. This allowed me to offer higher quality products with better profit margins. By the end of the first year, I had reached $100,000 in revenue. I couldn't believe it. A year ago, I was stuck in a job I hated, and now I was running my own business, making money while I slept. But with this success came even more work. I needed to scale, and fast. So, I reinvested every penny I made into the business. I hired more employees, expanded my product line, and doubled down on advertising. It was around this time that I began thinking about the future. I didn't want to just build a business for the sake of it. I wanted to create something that would last. I started working on building a brand, something people could trust. I began offering personalized products for pets, like custom pet collars and engraved bowls, which became a huge hit. My business continued to grow, but so did the pressure. The more successful I became, the more people doubted me. I faced competitors who tried to copy my products and undercut my prices. I had to keep innovating, keep finding new ways to stand out. It was exhausting, but it was also thrilling. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. We've expanded into new markets, launched our own line of eco-friendly pet products, and built a loyal customer base. We've hit over $5 million in revenue this year, and I've been able to hire a team of 50 employees. I'm living a life I once only dreamed of, but it hasn't been easy. The road to success was filled with obstacles, late nights, and moments of doubt. But the key is perseverance. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I questioned if I was cut out for entrepreneurship, but every setback was an opportunity to learn and grow. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone looking to start a business, it's this: don't be afraid to fail. Every failure is a lesson, and every success is built on the foundation of those lessons. It's been a crazy ride, and I'm grateful for every step of the journey. My business has changed my life in ways I never could have imagined, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. If I can do it, so can you. Keep going, even when it seems impossible. The best things in life never come easy. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I started my journey to becoming an entrepreneur with almost no money, no business experience, and, honestly, not even a clear vision of what I was doing. I grew up in a small town where opportunities were limited, and people were mostly content with their 9 to 5 jobs. I was always the dreamer, the one who believed that there had to be something more out there. But my reality didn't align with my dreams, and I ended up working odd jobs just to make ends meet. I worked as a cashier, then as a delivery driver, and later as a part-time barista. It wasn't glamorous, but it was my life at the time. It was during my time as a barista that I stumbled upon my first business idea. One slow afternoon, a regular customer walked in, a young woman who was always dressed impeccably. She was always on her laptop, typing away, with a cup of coffee in hand. One day, I asked her what she was working on, and she told me she was running her own digital marketing agency. I'd never heard of anything like that before, but her success intrigued me. It didn't take much for me to ask her how she got started, and she shared some advice that would change my life. Start small, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to fail. I thought about that conversation for days. I had no idea what digital marketing even was, but the idea of running my own business became an obsession. I wanted to learn, to grow, and maybe, just maybe, build something of my own. I didn't have much, but I had a computer and a lot of determination. I started consuming every piece of content I could find about digital marketing, from YouTube tutorials to online courses to free webinars. There were countless nights I stayed up late trying to understand the basics of SEO, Google Ads, Facebook marketing, and email campaigns. At first, everything felt like a foreign language. The jargon was overwhelming, and I often felt like I was drowning in information. But I refused to give up. I knew that if I could just stick with it long enough, I would eventually make sense of it all. I started offering my digital marketing services for free to local small businesses. I knew that in order to build a portfolio, I had to take any opportunity, no matter how small, to gain experience. My first client was a local flower shop that was struggling to get traffic to their website. They had no social media presence, and their website looked like it had been built in the early 2000s. I convinced them to let me redesign their website and run a Facebook ad campaign for them. I worked tirelessly, often for free, to make sure the results were as good as possible. After a few weeks, their sales started to pick up. They were so happy with the results that they referred me to another local business, and from there, things slowly started to snowball. I had no formal training, no mentors, and no money to invest in advertising, but I kept learning, experimenting, and refining my skills. I kept building my portfolio, even if it meant working for free or at a loss. Eventually, I reached a point where I had enough clients to charge for my services. I started my own digital marketing agency, which, in hindsight, seems like an absurdly bold decision considering how little I knew at the time. In the beginning, I was wearing all the hats. I was the marketer, the accountant, the salesperson, and the customer support team all rolled into one. It was exhausting, and there were countless times I felt like throwing in the towel. But I kept pushing forward. I had no safety net, and I couldn't afford to fail. Slowly but surely, my agency started to grow. I hired my first employee, a graphic designer I had met at a networking event. She was talented, and together we were able to take on more projects. The growth was steady, but the real breakthrough came when we landed a contract with a mid-sized e-commerce company. They had been struggling with their online presence, and their sales were stagnant. I knew this was my chance to prove myself. I invested all my time and energy into their project, working long hours and pulling all-nighters to ensure their success. I implemented a new SEO strategy, redesigned their website, optimized their product pages, and launched targeted ad campaigns. Within 6 months, their revenue doubled. That project put my agency on the map. Suddenly, we were getting more inquiries than we could handle. Clients were coming to us with higher budgets, and I was able to hire more team members to keep up with the demand. As the agency grew, so did the pressure. I had to learn how to manage a team, delegate tasks, and build a company culture. I spent a lot of time figuring out systems and processes, which were crucial to scaling. I also learned how to balance the creative side of marketing with the practical side of running a business. One of the hardest lessons I learned early on was how to handle rejection. For every success, there were multiple failures. Some clients didn't pay on time, others didn't appreciate the work we did, and a few even sued us for results that didn't meet their unrealistic expectations. There were days when I wondered if I had made a mistake, but I always came back to my original vision, building something that was truly mine. Over the years, my agency grew into a successful business, and I started to diversify my investments. I expanded into e-commerce and created my own online store, selling digital products related to marketing. I also started investing in real estate, which gave me a sense of financial security and allowed me to further expand my portfolio. But even as my wealth grew, I never lost sight of what really mattered, helping others and providing value. Now, looking back on my journey, I can say with confidence that becoming an entrepreneur was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments when I thought about giving up. But every failure was a lesson, and every challenge made me stronger. If I could go back and give myself advice, it would be this: keep learning, keep improving, and never be afraid to take risks. You don't need all the answers at the start. You just need the courage to start. Being an entrepreneur isn't about having it all figured out from the beginning. It's about persevering through the uncertainty, staying committed to your vision, and finding joy in the journey. Sure, there will be tough times. There always are, but there will also be moments of triumph that make it all worthwhile. And when you look back, you'll realize that the real success wasn't just in building a business, it was in becoming the person you always hoped you could be. So if you're sitting on the sidelines, wondering if you have what it takes, just take that first step. Trust me, you have more in you than you think. And the road ahead might not be easy, but it's yours to pave. I always thought the corporate world was the only way to make a living. Growing up, my parents pushed me towards the typical path: get good grades, go to college, land a solid job, and climb the ladder. But my story didn't play out the way I expected. I always thought I'd be content with a steady paycheck, a nice house, and a few vacations each year. What I didn't expect was that the corporate world would end up suffocating me and pushing me toward a different kind of success. It started with a simple idea. I had worked in corporate marketing for years, in a comfortable job with a decent salary, but I always felt like I was giving more than I was getting. Every day was the same: meetings, spreadsheets, and endless emails. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. to catch the 7 a.m. train, spend the whole day in an office, then come home exhausted only to repeat it the next day. Weekends were barely enough to recharge before I had to do it all over again. My first real inkling that something needed to change came during a long, soul-crushing meeting. My boss had been giving us a long speech about how the company was going to make big changes to improve employee engagement, but I could barely focus. I kept thinking, this is what I'm spending my life doing? Helping this massive company tweak their strategies for a few extra % of growth while I get paid the same. I was stuck in a cycle of burnout. That's when the idea hit me. I had always loved fitness. It was my escape. Whether it was going for a run or doing yoga at home, exercise made me feel alive again. Over the years, I'd accumulated a decent amount of knowledge about fitness, nutrition, and well-being. But it wasn't just about the physical benefits. The mental clarity, the sense of accomplishment, and the overall energy boost I felt were what truly kept me coming back. I began to wonder, could I turn this passion into something more? I started small. Instead of spending hours binge-watching shows or scrolling through social media, I began to dedicate my free time to learning about entrepreneurship. I consumed every podcast, book, and YouTube video I could find on starting a business. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that I could actually create something of my own, something that would allow me to be in control of my own destiny. In the beginning, I thought I'd start a fitness blog. It seemed like the easiest way to dip my toes into the entrepreneurial waters. I already had the knowledge, and writing felt like a natural outlet. I launched the blog, put up some basic content, and started promoting it on social media. But after a few months, I realized something. Nobody was paying attention. The blog didn't get the traffic I had hoped for, and the monetization efforts barely moved the needle. I felt defeated. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this after all. But I didn't give up. I tried something different. Instead of focusing on writing, I decided to create a series of online fitness programs. These would be tailored workout plans that people could download, no fancy gym equipment required. I invested in a simple website and began working on the content. The idea was simple. Give people the tools they needed to improve their health, no matter their location or skill level. I spent weeks recording videos and designing guides. It wasn't easy, but I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. When I launched the program, I felt a sense of vulnerability I hadn't expected. There I was, putting something I'd created out into the world, hoping people would pay for it. I had no clue how to market this new venture, but I decided to start small. I reached out to a few friends, offering them discounts in exchange for honest feedback and sharing with their networks. Slowly, things started to pick up. I added more programs, diversified the content, and began posting on social media with more intention. It wasn't an overnight success. In fact, I didn't make any real money for the first few months. But something shifted in me during that time. I realized that entrepreneurship wasn't just about making money. It was about building something meaningful, something that could improve the lives of others. As I received positive feedback from users who had successfully followed my programs and improved their fitness, I knew I was onto something. At this point, I decided to double down. I quit my job. It wasn't a decision I made lightly. I had financial responsibilities, bills to pay, and a family who relied on me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep working in a corporate job that drained my energy while my real passion, fitness and entrepreneurship, was growing quietly on the side. I had to make the leap. Without a steady paycheck, I became hyper-focused. I refined my business, honed my marketing strategy, and started reaching out to influencers in the fitness community for collaborations. Slowly, the business began to grow. Sales increased, and I was able to reinvest the money into scaling the brand. I brought on a team to help with content creation and customer service, and I started hosting online workshops to expand my reach. But even as the business grew, I faced countless challenges. There were days when I felt like everything was falling apart. I remember one particular week when our website crashed on the day we were launching a new program. Customers couldn't access their purchased content, and my inbox was flooded with angry messages. I spent hours on the phone with technical support, trying to get everything back up and running. I was exhausted, frustrated, and tempted to just throw in the towel. But I pushed through. I worked through the problems, responded to every customer, and promised them that we were fixing things. I learned quickly that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. There are highs and lows, and sometimes you just have to hang in there long enough to see the next breakthrough. Slowly but surely, my business began to gain traction. It wasn't just about selling fitness programs anymore. It was about creating a community, one that valued health, well-being, and empowerment. People weren't just buying a workout, they were buying into a lifestyle. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. I've built a company that I'm proud of, one that allows me to help people live healthier lives while giving me the freedom to be my own boss. And while it's still not easy, entrepreneurship rarely is, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm no longer chained to a 9-to-5 job that drained my soul. Instead, I wake up every day excited about the work I do, knowing that I'm making a difference. And as I look forward to the future, I'm excited about the endless possibilities. I guess the moral of the story is simple. Sometimes you have to take a leap. Sometimes you have to walk away from what's comfortable and take a risk in order to build something you truly care about. And when you do, Be prepared for the hard work that comes with it. But know that if you keep pushing through, you'll eventually look back and realize it was all worth it. That's what I've learned, and I'll never look back. I've always been the kind of person who sees opportunities in the most unlikely places. I grew up in a small town where everyone had pretty straightforward careers: teachers, farmers, shopkeepers. No one really talked about entrepreneurship or chasing big dreams. But for some reason, I always felt there was something more to life than just following the usual path. After high school, I went to college and studied business, not because I was particularly passionate about it, but because I had no idea what I actually wanted to do. Business seemed like the safe choice, a broad field where I could explore different possibilities. During those years, I worked part-time jobs, anything that would give me a sense of independence and some spending money. I did everything from working as a cashier at a grocery store to being a waiter at a local diner. But none of those jobs were going to get me closer to where I thought I should be. The turning point came during my senior year. I was sitting in class, learning about marketing and entrepreneurship, when I realized I could apply the lessons to a business I already had in mind. This idea had been floating in my head for a while, but I never had the courage to pursue it. It all started with an obsession with custom t-shirts. I had seen some of the cool designs people were making on Etsy and other platforms, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was a market for them. T-shirts were simple, inexpensive to produce, and a great way to express individuality. I spent hours on websites like Pinterest and Instagram, researching popular designs and thinking about what could set my brand apart. I knew nothing about graphic design or printing, but I was determined. I spent the next few months teaching myself design basics, using free software like Canva and GIMP. I watched countless YouTube tutorials on printing techniques, and I even reached out to local printers to learn about their processes. I didn't have much money, but I invested in a few basic tools to get started, mainly a decent printer and some blank shirts. My first batch of designs was a mix of basic typography and funny slogans, which I thought people would love. I was still in school at this point, so I had some flexibility with time, but no idea how I was going to actually sell these shirts. I launched my first website, and honestly, it was a mess. It was clunky, the pictures were poorly taken, and I didn't have much of a social media following. I shared it with my friends and family, hoping for at least a handful of sales, but it was slow going. The first sale I made was to a college friend. I can still remember the excitement I felt when I saw the email notification. It was like a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. I had a lot of work ahead of me. The next challenge was marketing. I didn't have any budget for ads, so I started posting on Instagram and Facebook. I reached out to influencers, mostly friends who had decent followings, and asked if they'd share my products in exchange for a free shirt. Some agreed, others didn't, but those who did helped spread the word, and slowly but surely, the orders started rolling in. I was working around the clock, designing, printing, shipping, but every time I filled an order, it felt like progress. After a few months, I realized I needed to streamline my operations. I was spending too much time fulfilling orders, and not enough time designing or growing my business. I invested in a dropshipping model for my t-shirts, which meant I could focus on design and marketing while a third-party company handled the printing and shipping. It was a risky move because I had no experience with dropshipping, but I knew it would free up my time and help me scale faster. The next step was the hardest part, scaling. I invested everything I had into Facebook and Instagram ads. I learned how to target the right audiences, test different ad formats, and optimize for conversions. It was an immediate success, and there were plenty of times when I thought about giving up. I remember one particular week when I lost a significant chunk of money on poorly performing ads. It was a punch in the gut. But instead of quitting, I decided to analyze my results, make adjustments, and try again. Slowly, my sales started to pick up. With the additional revenue, I could reinvest in new designs, better marketing campaigns, and even hire a part-time assistant to help with customer service. It wasn't long before I was making enough to quit my part-time job and go full-time with the business. I felt a huge sense of accomplishment, but at the same time, I knew this was just the beginning. I continued to iterate on my designs, paying close attention to trends and customer feedback. I expanded my product offerings, adding hoodies, mugs, and phone cases. My brand became known for quirky, funny, and unique designs that resonated with people's personalities. I also started building a community around my brand. I ran contests, engaged with my followers on social media, and created a sense of belonging for those who wore my products. As the business grew, so did the challenges. There were constant hurdles, shipping delays, quality control issues, customer complaints, but I learned to deal with them one at a time. I also had to deal with the pressure of managing everything myself. I remember one sleepless night when I was up until 3 a.m., trying to figure out how to handle an order mix-up. I was stressed and exhausted, but I knew I couldn't give up. This business was my dream, and I was determined to make it work. Today, my brand is thriving. I've expanded into international markets, hired a full-time team, and even opened a brick-and-mortar store. I've had some of the best moments in my life through this journey, seeing my products worn by celebrities, receiving heartwarming messages from customers, and even being recognized at local events. But it wasn't all easy. The road to success was filled with sleepless nights, failures, and moments when I doubted myself. Looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. I went from being a broke college student with an idea and no experience to running a successful business that I'm passionate about. And while I've had some lucky breaks along the way, I also worked my ass off to get here. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when I thought I wasn't cut out for this, but I kept going because I believed in myself and my vision. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that success isn't about luck. It's about persistence, learning from mistakes, and continuously improving. If you have an idea, no matter how small or unconventional, take that first step. You never know where it might lead. I was never supposed to be an entrepreneur. At least, that's what everyone told me. I grew up in a small town where dreams of becoming a business owner were seen as distant fantasies reserved for the lucky few. My family wasn't rich, and my parents worked hard to make ends meet. I remember watching my dad, a mechanic, come home after long days at the garage, exhausted, but always with a smile on his face. "It's all about work ethic," he'd say. "If you keep pushing, things will turn around." That was the first lesson in business I ever learned, though I didn't know it at the time. After high school, I did what was expected of me and went to college. I enrolled in a local community college, thinking I'd study something practical, like business administration. But deep down, I wasn't sure if that was the right path for me. I was always fascinated by tech, gadgets, and anything that seemed to push boundaries. But there I was, buried under textbooks and lectures, trying to live up to the image of what I was supposed to be rather than what I wanted to be. It wasn't until my second year in college when everything changed. I was broke, frustrated with my life, and working part-time at a local coffee shop just to keep the bills paid. I spent my free time reading articles about startups, tech moguls, and the rise of companies from nothing. It seemed like everyone who had succeeded had started young, with an idea they were passionate about, and relentlessly pursued it. I thought to myself, if they can do it, why can't I? The tipping point came one evening when I was working the closing shift at the coffee shop. We were quiet, and I found myself scrolling through tech blogs on my phone, looking at the latest gadgets. Then it hit me, why didn't I try to design something unique in the tech space? I had a passion for gaming and computers, and there was this market gap I noticed. People were constantly looking for ways to improve their gaming setups without spending a fortune. Gaming chairs were ridiculously expensive, but there wasn't really an affordable option that offered both comfort and utility. And that was it. I had an idea, one that I couldn't shake. The next morning, I skipped my usual lecture and started sketching designs for a budget-friendly gaming chair that would offer a premium feel. I had no clue how to make a chair, no experience in manufacturing, and certainly no capital to get things rolling. But I felt that spark, that belief that maybe, just maybe, I could figure it out. I spent hours researching everything I could find about chair design, materials, ergonomics, and the gaming community. I knew I had to understand the market, what gamers wanted, and what they didn't like about the chairs available. I pitched the idea to my friends, who were all gamers. They loved it. They told me I was onto something. But then came the hard truth. I needed money. I didn't have a savings account, let alone enough to build a prototype. So, I did what anyone in my shoes would do. I borrowed money from my parents. I told them I wanted to start a project and asked them for a loan. They were hesitant, of course. They wanted me to focus on my education, not waste time on some pipe dream. But after a lot of convincing and promising to pay them back as soon as I could, they agreed. With the $500 loan, I started small. I found a local manufacturer who could help me create a prototype. I spent countless hours refining the design, choosing the materials, and making sure the chair would be both comfortable and functional. The first prototype was far from perfect. It was bulky, too heavy, and the stitching wasn't great. But it was a start. I went back to the drawing board, working with the manufacturer to fix the issues. I didn't give up, even when the process felt slow and discouraging. By the time I had a functional prototype, I was in my final year of college. I decided to launch a crowdfunding campaign, something I had learned about from following tech startups. It was a risk, but I didn't have any other option. The campaign took off much faster than I expected. Within the first few days, I had reached my goal. Orders started coming in, and suddenly, I was no longer a student at a coffee shop. I was a small business owner with a product that was being shipped to gamers all over the country. But the journey was far from smooth. The first batch of chairs arrived late, and many were damaged during shipping. I had to deal with a flood of angry emails, customers wanting refunds, and suppliers who were either unresponsive or unreliable. I realized that building a business wasn't just about having a good product. It was about handling problems and never losing sight of the bigger picture. To make matters worse, I had to juggle my business with my academic responsibilities. I would attend classes, then rush home to deal with emails, track shipments, and troubleshoot issues with my product. Many nights, I stayed up until 2 or 3 a.m. managing both. It felt like an impossible balancing act, and there were times when I wanted to give up. But I kept pushing forward. I kept reminding myself of why I started in the first place. Months later, after numerous setbacks and learning experiences, the business began to take off. The gaming chairs were selling well, and word of mouth spread. I reinvested every dollar I earned back into the business, expanding my product line with accessories, such as gaming desks and mousepads. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I learned so much about manufacturing, marketing, and customer service, all of which helped me grow as an entrepreneur. One day, a major gaming influencer reached out to me. They wanted to feature my chair in one of their videos. I couldn't believe it. This was the kind of exposure I had dreamed of. The video went viral, and sales skyrocketed. It felt like everything had come full circle, and I knew that I had truly made it. I had turned an idea into a business that was now a recognizable brand in the gaming community. Looking back, it still feels surreal. I didn't have any special skills or a big bank account to back me up. All I had was a passion for gaming, a willingness to learn, and the drive to never give up. My journey hasn't been easy, and I still face challenges every day. But every time I hear from a satisfied customer or see my products in the hands of gamers, I'm reminded that it was all worth it. Being an entrepreneur isn't about luck. It's about persistence and the ability to keep moving forward, even when the odds seem impossible. I'll be honest. When I started my business, I never imagined it would turn into what it is today. It all started back in 2015 when I was in my mid-20s, struggling to pay rent and juggling multiple side gigs just to get by. My entrepreneurial journey was nothing like what you see on social media, where every second person claims to be an overnight success. No, my story was one of constant failures, missed opportunities, and relentless hustle. At the time, I was working a 9-to-5 job that I hated, but it paid the bills. I had an office job in a marketing firm, and while I appreciated the steady income, I felt like I was drowning in mediocrity. My friends all had their own businesses or were in the process of building something, and I couldn't help but feel envious. I was always talking about business ideas that I had, but I never followed through on any of them. One evening, after yet another failed attempt at a hobby business, I'd started selling handmade jewelry on Etsy, which ended up making just enough money to buy a new pair of shoes. I decided that it was time to finally take a leap of faith. I didn't know where to start, but I was fed up with sitting around and watching others succeed. So, I did the only thing that seemed right, signed up for a free online course about starting an e-commerce store. That was the moment that changed everything for me. I didn't have a lot of money to invest. In fact, my savings account was barely enough to cover a month's rent, but I had this gut feeling that if I just learned everything I could about running an online business, I could turn my life around. After spending weeks researching, binge-watching YouTube videos, and reading blog posts on how to start an online store, I decided to give it a go. I used every penny I had to buy a basic domain and a Shopify plan. My store was a mess at first, just some cheap products I'd found on AliExpress, but I was determined to make it work. The first few months were brutal. I spent every spare second tweaking my website, designing product pages, and trying to learn about SEO, paid ads, and marketing strategies. There were days I wanted to quit, days when I made zero sales and could barely afford to pay for the ads that I thought were supposed to bring in customers. I couldn't afford fancy tools or agencies, so I did everything myself. But I was hungry, and that hunger kept me going. Then, after about 3 months of soul-crushing work, something magical happened. I woke up one morning to a notification that I had made my first sale. It wasn't much, just a $40 order for a pair of sunglasses, but it was everything to me. I felt like I had finally cracked the code. I immediately ran around the house, telling everyone, I made a sale. I made a sale. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that my effort wasn't in vain. That first sale was a turning point. It was the motivation I needed to keep going. I began analyzing my business, looking at what worked and what didn't. The key was in refining my marketing and offering products that people actually wanted. I started reaching out to influencers in my niche, offering free products in exchange for exposure. Slowly but surely, I began to see more sales roll in. As sales started to grow, I had to hire my first employee. It was a big step for me because I was terrified of letting go of control. But I was drowning in customer service emails and packing orders, and I knew that if I didn't delegate, I'd burn out. Hiring that first employee was a game changer. With more hands on deck, I could focus on growing the business even further. Over the next 2 years, my store steadily grew. I was able to quit my 9-to-5 job, travel the world, and start living life on my own terms. The business was far from perfect, but it was mine, and it was thriving. I expanded my product offerings, increased my social media presence, and even started a YouTube channel to share my entrepreneurial journey. But, of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. In 2018, my business hit a major bump. My supplier in China was hit with shipping delays, and suddenly, I couldn't fulfill orders on time. Customers were angry, refund requests piled up, and the stress was unbearable. I nearly lost everything. There were moments when I seriously thought about walking away and starting over with something else. But then I remembered why I started in the first place, to escape mediocrity and live life on my own terms. So, I doubled down. I pivoted my entire business model. Instead of relying on suppliers from overseas, I started working with local suppliers to ensure faster delivery times. I also invested in automation tools to streamline my operations. It was a difficult transition, but it paid off. Within 6 months, sales rebounded, and I was back on track. Fast forward to 2021, and my business had grown beyond what I had ever dreamed. I had a full team of 10 employees, a robust supply chain, and loyal customers who loved my brand. We had expanded internationally, and I was finally able to take a step back from the day-to-day operations and focus on the bigger picture. But even then, I continued to face challenges. The world was changing, and so was e-commerce. Consumer expectations were higher than ever, and competition was fierce. It wasn't enough to simply offer a great product. I had to innovate constantly. That's when I realized the importance of building a strong brand. People didn't just want to buy products from me. They wanted to be a part of something bigger. So, I focused on creating a community around my business. We started running charity events, collaborating with other entrepreneurs, and offering exclusive experiences for our loyal customers. The brand wasn't just about selling, it was about making an impact. Looking back on my journey, I'm proud of everything I've accomplished, but I'm also aware of the sacrifices. I've missed weddings, birthdays, and family events because I was too focused on growing the business. I've had sleepless nights, stress-induced breakdowns, and moments of doubt. But it's all been worth it. I never expected to become the person I am today. I never thought I'd be running a multi-million-dollar business. But through perseverance, mistakes, and learning from every failure, I built something I'm incredibly proud of. It's been a roller coaster ride, but I wouldn't change a thing. If there's one thing I've learned throughout this journey, it's this. There's no such thing as overnight success. Every entrepreneur I know who's made it had to put in the work, face challenges head-on, and keep going even when the road seemed impossible. The key is to start. You don't need everything figured out right away. You just need to take that first step. Because you never know where it will lead. I'm not perfect. My business isn't perfect. But I'm living proof that anyone can build something from nothing if they're willing to put in the work and never give up. I was 24 when I first realized that my life wasn't going to look like the one my parents had envisioned for me. They had always been proud of their stable careers. My dad was an accountant, and my mom worked as a nurse. Both had secure jobs, predictable hours, and reliable paychecks. They were comfortable, and that's exactly what they wanted for me: stability, security, and a predictable future. But for me, that world felt like a cage. I remember one night, after working at my 9-to-5 job at a corporate marketing agency for almost 2 years, I sat in my small apartment in downtown Chicago, staring out at the skyline, feeling a mixture of frustration and longing. I had been following the script for years, get a degree, get a job, climb the corporate ladder, but none of it excited me. I felt like I was suffocating, living someone else's life. I had always been a creative person. I loved design, loved playing around with ideas, but I had never seriously thought about doing it as a career. But in that moment, it hit me. I could be building something of my own. I had a passion for branding, content, and creating something from scratch. The problem was that I had no idea where to start. I didn't have the experience, the mentorship, or the connections. All I had was a dream, and honestly, that didn't feel like enough. But here's the thing about desperation, it breeds innovation. I started reading everything I could about entrepreneurship. I devoured blogs, books, and listened to podcasts. Slowly but surely, I started learning. I understood the basic principles of running a business, the importance of a clear vision, understanding your market, and, of course, the financial side. But the more I read, the more I realized I didn't want to follow a traditional business route. I wanted something that was uniquely mine, something that reflected my own style and perspective. One day, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across a post about a young entrepreneur who had launched a social media marketing agency. She was just a few years older than me, and the idea seemed so simple: help small businesses grow their online presence. I had seen so many small businesses in my city struggling to stand out on social media, and here was an entire market that needed help. It clicked instantly. That night, I decided to take the plunge. I didn't have much money saved up, and I didn't have any clients, but I had the skills I had developed during my time at the marketing agency, and I had a willingness to learn fast. I spent hours over the next few weeks building a website, designing my logo, and figuring out how to price my services. I wasn't sure if anyone would hire me, but I knew that if I didn't try, I'd never know. At first, the responses were slow. I reached out to every small business in my area: coffee shops, local boutiques, gyms, and even a few yoga studios. Most didn't even respond. But then, one day, I got an email from a small restaurant in the city. They wanted help with their Instagram account. The owner, a woman named Maria, had been running the restaurant for 5 years but had never really invested in social media. She wanted to attract more customers, especially younger ones. I was ecstatic. This was my first real client, and I had no intention of messing it up. I put everything I had into that project. I worked late nights on content creation, researching trends, crafting captions, and engaging with followers. Within 3 months, the restaurant's Instagram following doubled, and they started seeing an uptick in business. Maria was thrilled with the results and referred me to a few other business owners she knew. This was the turning point. Word of mouth began to spread, and I started getting more clients. But there was a problem. I was still working my 9 to 5 job, and it was getting harder and harder to juggle both. There were days when I was barely sleeping, working all night on client projects and then heading straight into the office the next morning. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. So, after 6 months of building my side business, I made the decision to quit my job. It was terrifying. I remember walking into my boss's office, handing in my resignation letter, and feeling like my whole world was shifting beneath me. But as soon as I walked out of that office, there was a sense of relief and excitement. I was officially an entrepreneur. The first few months of being full-time in my business were a whirlwind. There were ups and downs, but the one thing I had was control. I could make decisions without waiting for someone else's approval, and that was incredibly freeing. I expanded my services, hired a small team to help with content creation, and started working with bigger clients. By the end of my first year, my income had more than doubled compared to what I was making at my corporate job. I was still operating from a tiny office in my apartment, but I had built something sustainable. My client base was growing, and I had found a niche that I loved. I didn't just want to be a social media marketing expert. I wanted to build brands. And that's exactly what I did. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. My business now serves over 40 clients, ranging from local businesses to national brands. I've expanded into consulting, helping other entrepreneurs launch and scale their businesses. I even hired a team of creatives who share my vision. There were definitely moments where I thought about giving up. There were days when I felt like I wasn't good enough, or when I doubted whether I could make it. But I pushed through because I knew that if I didn't try, I would always regret it. Today, I'm proud of what I built, but I don't take it for granted. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's hard work, long hours, and constant problem solving. But it's also rewarding. I wake up every day knowing that I've created something from nothing, and that gives me the energy to keep pushing forward. So, to anyone who's feeling stuck in a job they don't love or wondering if they can take the leap, I'm here to tell you it's possible. It won't be easy, but if you're passionate, committed, and willing to put in the work, you can build something incredible. Don't let fear hold you back. The world needs your unique ideas and your creativity. Take the plunge, and you just might surprise yourself. I had no idea what I was doing. In fact, I still don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but that's what I tell people when they ask how I built my business. It all started in my cramped, slightly run-down apartment in a quiet part of town. I was in my mid-20s, freshly out of college, and desperate to escape the 9-to-5 grind. I'd been working in marketing for a small startup, doing a job that didn't excite me, but I had bills to pay. The company went under a year later, and I was suddenly left with no job, no security, and a deep-seated desire to never work for anyone else again. I didn't have a ton of money saved up. In fact, I had just enough to cover rent for the next month or two, and I was quickly running out of options. But there was one thing: I had time, and an idea that had been rattling around in my head for months. What if I could build a business around something I was passionate about? I was an avid gamer, and I'd always enjoyed the competitive side of online gaming. I noticed that there was a growing trend around esports and streaming, but it was still somewhat niche. I'd watch other gamers on platforms like Twitch, seeing them build massive audiences and turn their passion into profit. But it was always the same thing. They either had a great personality or they were already influencers with thousands of followers. I didn't have either, but I did have a strong understanding of digital marketing. I'd been studying SEO, social media growth, and content creation during my time at the startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical. And I figured that if I could apply those skills to the world of esports, I could carve out a niche for myself. I didn't have the money to invest in a full-scale esports team or equipment like some of the bigger organizations. What I did have was a laptop and a ton of free time. So I decided to create a platform that could help amateur gamers get noticed. The idea was simple: a website that connected players, offered tutorials, and provided resources on how to improve their skills and grow their online presence. I spent countless hours researching, building a website, and designing content that would help aspiring gamers. I knew I needed to start small and focus on something that would set me apart from other platforms. So, I began creating educational content that covered everything from gaming tips to how to market yourself as a content creator. I also started offering one-on-one coaching sessions to help gamers who were serious about improving their streams. But there was one problem: no one knew who I was. I had no following, no credibility. The first few months were a struggle, but I kept pushing forward. I reached out to small gaming communities on Reddit and Discord, offering my advice for free. Slowly but surely, people started to take notice. They'd come to my website, read the articles, and ask questions. Then they started booking coaching sessions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I didn't get a lot of sleep in those first few months. I spent every waking hour working on the business, learning new skills, and testing out different ways to get noticed. I learned how to use SEO to rank my articles, how to create engaging content, and how to build relationships with influencers who could help promote my platform. It was exhausting, but the small wins kept me going. The turning point came when I landed a partnership with a popular gaming influencer. They weren't huge, but they had a solid following, and they believed in what I was trying to do. I offered them a free coaching session in exchange for a shout-out on their stream. It worked. I saw a sudden surge in traffic to my website, and more gamers started booking sessions. That was the breakthrough moment I had been waiting for. From there, things started to snowball. I reinvested the small profits I made back into the business. I upgraded my website, hired a couple of freelancers to help with content creation, and started collaborating with other gaming communities. I also expanded my services to include live workshops and group coaching sessions. The more I focused on providing value to my audience, the more my brand grew. But just as things were taking off, I hit another obstacle. My server crashed. All of my website data was lost, and I had no backup. Years of work, gone in an instant. I remember sitting in front of my computer, staring at the blank screen in disbelief. It was one of the lowest moments of my life. I thought about quitting. The business was starting to gain traction, but now everything felt like it was falling apart. After a few days of sulking and trying to figure out what to do next, I made the decision to rebuild. I hired a web development team to help me get my site back up and running as quickly as possible. I also learned the hard lesson of always keeping backups. When the site finally went live again, I sent out an apology to my audience, explaining what had happened and offering a discount on coaching sessions to make up for the downtime. The outpouring of support I received from my community was overwhelming. People didn't mind the setback. They were just glad to see I was still going. That's when I realized that building a business wasn't just about the product or service, it was about the people. The community I had started to build was everything. They had become invested in my journey, and they were rooting for me to succeed. From then on, I focused even more on nurturing that community. I created a members-only Discord channel where gamers could connect with each other, share tips, and talk strategy. I also launched a podcast where I interviewed professional players, coaches, and streamers, offering insights into how they made it in the esports world. My platform became a hub for all things gaming, and the traffic continued to grow. Fast forward to today, and I'm running a multi-million-dollar business. We've expanded to offer a range of services from team management to tournament organization. I've hired a team of talented individuals who share my vision and are helping to take the business to the next level. We've even started producing our own esports events with sponsorships from major brands. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. There were so many sleepless nights, moments where I thought about giving up, and setbacks that felt insurmountable. But through it all, one thing kept me going. The belief that if I kept providing value, kept helping others, and kept pushing through the tough times, I could build something great. I'm not saying it was easy, or that there's a magic formula for success. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that persistence is key. You don't need to have all the answers from the start, and you don't need to have a huge following or a massive budget. What you need is a willingness to learn, a passion for what you're doing, and the ability to adapt when things go wrong. And above all, you need to believe in yourself, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. It was 2017 when I found myself staring at a wall of empty shelves in a tiny office, just a few blocks away from the bustling city center. My startup, a company I'd poured every ounce of energy into, was on the verge of collapse. The bank account was nearing zero, my savings were almost gone, and the investors I had once wooed with grand promises were now silent, probably already writing me off as another failed dreamer. But that wasn't what scared me the most. What haunted me in those final moments was the thought of calling my wife. We had just welcomed our first child into the world a few months earlier. How could I face her? How could I tell her that all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, and the optimism I had built my dreams upon were coming crashing down? Looking back, it feels like a blur, the darkest time of my life. But it was also the moment I made a decision that would change everything. I would not let this failure define me. To understand how I got to that point, let me take you back to where it all started. I grew up in a working-class family. My dad worked as a mechanic, and my mom was a nurse. They weren't wealthy, but they instilled in me the importance of hard work and perseverance. I went to college on a scholarship, studying business administration. I knew early on that I didn't want to follow the conventional path. The 9-to-5 grind wasn't for me. I wanted to build something I could call my own. After graduation, I went through a few jobs, each more unfulfilling than the last. The corporate world felt suffocating, and I quickly realized that I wanted to create something that would have a real impact on people's lives. It wasn't long before I quit my job and started working on a business idea I'd been nurturing for years, a subscription service for personalized home goods. The idea was simple. In today's world, people craved personalized experiences. Custom furniture, personalized wall art, bespoke home accessories, things that would make their homes truly unique. I believed that if I could bring these items to customers' doorsteps every month, I could carve out a niche in the market. I threw myself into it. I spent every waking moment working on building the business. I found suppliers, negotiated deals, and built a website. But like any entrepreneur, I hit roadblocks. There were technical issues with the website, delays in production, and most frustrating of all, customer acquisition. I poured money into digital ads, only to see a trickle of sales. It wasn't the explosive growth I had imagined. It was discouraging, to say the least. But I wasn't going to give up. I doubled down on social media. I connected with influencers, sent out samples, and engaged with anyone who showed even the slightest interest. Slowly, things started to pick up. People loved the idea of personalized products, and they appreciated the effort I put into making each item special. The sales started coming in, and while it wasn't enough to quit my day job, I could feel the momentum building. Fast forward to 2016, and the business had grown enough for me to finally leave my job. I went full-time into the startup, ready to take it to the next level. I hired a small team, invested in marketing, and even partnered with some well-known brands. Things were looking promising, but the growth came with a new set of challenges. Cash flow became a problem. We had too many orders coming in, but not enough capital to fulfill them in a timely manner. Customers started complaining about delayed deliveries, and that's when the first cracks appeared. I should have seen the signs, but I didn't. I was too caught up in the excitement of expansion. I wasn't paying attention to the fact that we were spending more than we were earning. I thought I could fix it by raising more capital, bringing in new investors, and scaling the business faster. But as it often goes in the startup world, things didn't work out that way. The money didn't come in, and the cash flow problem worsened. By the time I realized we were in real trouble, it was too late. In the spring of 2017, the tipping point came. We had just missed a payment to one of our suppliers, and they cut us off. The orders piled up, and I couldn't keep up with them. We didn't have enough inventory, and our reputation began to suffer. Customers who had once been excited about our products were now posting negative reviews, and the pressure was mounting. My team was frustrated, and morale was at an all-time low. That's when I had to make a decision, either shut it down or push through, somehow. I knew I didn't have enough capital to sustain the business for much longer, but something inside me told me that I couldn't just let it go. I'd invested too much. I built too much. And I still believed in the idea. I didn't want to face my wife, my friends, and my employees and tell them I had failed. So, I made a choice. I decided to bet everything on one final, massive push. I took out a loan, restructured the company, and focused all our efforts on one big product launch. I didn't have the luxury of time, so I knew I had to make it work. It wasn't easy. We worked around the clock, rebuilding our inventory, reaching out to customers, and running an aggressive marketing campaign. Slowly but surely, things began to turn around. The new product launch was a hit, and we started getting more orders than we could have ever imagined. The loan I'd taken out wasn't just a financial risk. It was my last lifeline, and I had no choice but to make it work. It worked. The company slowly started to turn a profit again, and we were able to pay back the loan. More importantly, the customers returned. They saw that we were back on track, and the personalized home goods they'd fallen in love with were now better than ever. We continued growing, but this time, we did it cautiously. We focused on cash flow, customer satisfaction, and, above all, sustainability. By the end of 2018, we were in a much stronger position than we had ever been. We had a loyal customer base, a stable financial outlook, and a reputation that we worked hard to rebuild. Today, in 2025, the company is thriving. It's still not easy, but I've learned more in these past few years than I ever could have imagined. The sleepless nights, the stress, and the doubt have all been worth it. I look back at that small office in 2017, and I know now that failure wasn't an option. It was just a stepping stone. To any entrepreneur out there feeling like they're on the edge of giving up, don't. The road is long, and it will test you in ways you can't anticipate. But if you believe in your vision and are willing to do whatever it takes to make it work, you'll find a way. That's the truth I live by. It all started in 2015, when I was a 24-year-old college dropout, living in a tiny apartment in San Francisco. At the time, I had just quit my first job in tech because I was miserable. The pay was decent, but the office culture was soul-crushing. I remember spending hours sitting in front of my computer, feeling the weight of a monotonous routine slowly suffocating me. Every morning, I would wake up at 6 a.m., drag myself out of bed, and head to work, only to sit in meetings that drained the life out of me. It wasn't what I envisioned when I first decided to leave college and jump into the world of startups. I knew I wasn't cut out for the conventional 9-to-5 life. I wanted something more. I wanted to build something of my own, something that could make a real impact. But I had no idea where to start. I had a ton of ideas, but I couldn't narrow them down. Every time I came up with a new concept, I'd talk myself out of it, thinking it wasn't good enough or too risky. I didn't have the experience, the network, or the capital to launch a successful startup. It was easy to feel defeated. One evening, while scrolling through Reddit, I stumbled upon a post that would change everything. It was a discussion about the future of e-commerce and how small businesses were revolutionizing the industry with direct-to-consumer (DTC) brands. The post detailed how companies were using social media, creative marketing, and innovative products to build loyal customer bases. Something clicked inside me. I had always been obsessed with consumer products, and the idea of starting my own DTC brand seemed less daunting after reading the stories of people who had done it with little to no resources. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to at least try. The first step was figuring out what product I wanted to sell. I spent the next week brainstorming, researching, and testing ideas. I thought about everything from custom tech accessories to sustainable clothing, but nothing seemed to excite me. Then, one day while walking through a local park, I saw a group of people sitting on benches, all hunched over their phones. It was a beautiful day, and yet, everyone seemed to be glued to their screens. That's when it hit me. The one thing I couldn't seem to escape was my phone. I was constantly checking social media, replying to messages, scrolling through news feeds, and mindlessly checking my email. I wondered if I wasn't the only one who felt that way. After some research, I discovered that the average person spends over 3 hours a day on their phone. That's when I decided to create a product that could help people reclaim their time and reduce phone addiction, a minimalist, stylish, and functional phone case that would help people disconnect. It wasn't just about the phone case itself, but the idea behind it. I wanted to create a brand that would encourage mindfulness, reduce stress, and promote healthy phone habits. The case would be sleek, lightweight, and durable, something that could protect your phone without being bulky or distracting. I called it Mind Case. The next few months were a blur of learning. I had no background in design, manufacturing, or marketing. I spent hours watching YouTube videos, reading articles, and listening to podcasts. I dove into the world of e-commerce, learning everything I could about Shopify, branding, product photography, and social media marketing. My days were filled with late-night work sessions, creating prototypes, and trying to figure out how to bring my vision to life. I didn't have much money, so I had to be creative. I sold my old tech gadgets and cut back on all non-essential expenses to fund my first batch of prototypes. I spent hours on AliExpress, finding suppliers who could produce the cases I envisioned. After countless emails, calls, and negotiations, I finally found a manufacturer who was willing to work with me on a small order. I placed the order, took a deep breath, and waited. When the cases finally arrived, I was ecstatic. They weren't perfect, but they were close enough. I spent the next few weeks creating a simple website on Shopify and setting up social media accounts. I took photos of the cases in various settings, focusing on how they could fit seamlessly into people's lives. The next hurdle was driving traffic to my website. I didn't have a huge marketing budget, so I started small. I reached out to influencers in the mindfulness and tech space, offering them free cases in exchange for reviews and mentions on social media. I created a referral program to encourage word-of-mouth marketing. Slowly, people started noticing. The first sale I made was a moment I'll never forget. It was a late night, and I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Instagram, when I saw the notification, "Order confirmed." My heart raced. Someone had bought one of my cases. It was real. I wasn't just dreaming anymore. I had actually created something that someone else was willing to pay for. From there, things started to snowball. I reinvested every penny I made into growing the business. I ran Facebook ads, optimized my website, and kept tweaking my marketing strategies. Each sale brought in new ideas and new opportunities. I focused on building a community around my brand, sharing stories of how people were using Mindcase to disconnect from their phones and be more present. I even started a blog where I shared tips on mindfulness, phone addiction, and self-care. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. There were plenty of moments when I thought about giving up. There were times when I couldn't afford to pay for the next batch of inventory, or when I faced issues with shipping delays or customer complaints. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself that I had started this journey because I wanted to make a difference. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a brand with a purpose. Fast forward to 2020, and Mindcase had grown into a six-figure business. We had thousands of customers all over the world, and the brand had become synonymous with mindful living and phone-free moments. We expanded our product line to include phone accessories, laptop sleeves, and even a line of books and journals to help people disconnect from technology. Looking back, I still can't believe how far we've come. What started as a simple idea born from frustration with my own phone addiction had turned into a thriving business. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but every moment of struggle was worth it. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that the hardest part isn't coming up with an idea, it's believing in yourself and pushing through the doubts. Entrepreneurship isn't about having all the answers right away. It's about taking that first step, staying committed, and never giving up, even when things seem impossible. The road to success is rarely linear, but if you're willing to put in the work, anything is possible. So, to anyone out there who feels stuck, who thinks they don't have what it takes, or who's afraid to start, just take that first step. You might not have it all figured out, but that's okay. The journey is where the magic happens. And trust me, the reward is worth the risk. I've always been the kind of person who doesn't take no for an answer. Growing up, I had big dreams, but not a lot of direction. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't exactly living a life of luxury either. I was the first in my family to even think about going to college, let alone start a business. I didn't have the typical entrepreneurial background, and honestly, I didn't even know what that word meant when I was younger. But when I turned 21, something inside me clicked. I had always loved technology, gadgets, and the way things worked. I remember spending hours as a kid taking apart old radios and toasters just to see if I could put them back together. I guess that's when the seed was planted. My first business idea came to me one evening when I was working at a tech support job. I was handling a ton of customer issues daily and realized that many of the problems could be solved more efficiently if there was a one-stop solution for people to fix common tech problems without waiting on hold for hours. I began researching and talking to people, asking them what their biggest tech annoyances were. From there, I thought, why not create a website where users could learn how to fix their own issues with step-by-step guides, videos, and troubleshooting tools? It sounded simple, but I quickly realized that building a business from the ground up wasn't going to be easy. I didn't have much money saved up, but I was determined to make it happen. I started freelancing on the side, doing small tech-related jobs just to keep food on the table while working on my website. It wasn't glamorous, and I spent countless hours on my computer building the site and writing articles in between jobs. The first 6 months were tough. I barely made enough to cover my bills, and I often wondered if I had made a huge mistake. My friends and family thought I was crazy, working long hours and investing all my energy into something that wasn't generating any income. But I kept pushing forward, refusing to quit. Then one day, things started to turn around. I had posted a guide on how to fix a common laptop issue, and it started gaining traction. People were sharing it on social media, and before I knew it, I was getting hundreds of visits a day. At first, I didn't know how to monetize the website, but as traffic grew, so did my opportunities. I added ads to the site, offered affiliate links for tech products, and eventually launched a premium membership for people who wanted exclusive content. The first $100 I made from the site felt like a huge accomplishment. It was proof that my idea had potential and that my hard work was finally starting to pay off. The momentum kept building, and within a year, I was able to quit my tech support job and focus on my business full-time. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. As my business grew, I started expanding beyond tech guides. I created online courses, hosted webinars, and eventually built a community of like-minded people who were passionate about tech. The site became a hub for troubleshooting, learning, and sharing knowledge. But I wasn't done yet. I kept thinking about new ways to innovate and keep my audience engaged. One of the best decisions I made was hiring a small team. I found people who were just as passionate about tech as I was, and together, we started building a brand that wasn't just about solving problems, but also about connecting people. My team and I brainstormed new ideas every week, and we didn't shy away from experimenting. We launched a mobile app to help users diagnose issues on the go, and we started offering one-on-one tech consulting sessions. By the time I was 27, my business was generating over $1 million a year. It was a dream come true, but with success came new challenges. I was no longer the only one involved in the company, and I had to learn how to manage a team, handle the pressure of scaling, and ensure that we didn't lose the personal touch that had made our community so successful. I spent years learning about leadership, marketing, and finance, constantly evolving as both a person and a business owner. One of the hardest moments came during a major pivot. About 5 years into the business, I noticed a decline in traffic. People were starting to get more tech-savvy, and the need for basic troubleshooting guides was waning. It wasn't enough to just adapt. We had to completely rethink our approach. The industry was changing fast, and so were the expectations of our audience. I realized that we needed to be more than just a website offering tech solutions. We needed to create something that added even more value. I decided to shift our focus toward creating a comprehensive platform that integrated AI and machine learning to predict tech issues before they even happened. This pivot was risky. We had to reallocate resources, let go of some staff members, and take a significant financial hit. But in the end, it paid off. We built a product that not only solved problems, but also anticipated them. And that innovation catapulted us back into the spotlight. Fast forward to today, and my business is worth millions. We have over 50 employees, a global customer base, and a team that feels like family. We've expanded into new markets, launched new products, and even partnered with big names in the tech industry. But for me, the real success comes from the journey, the late nights, the failures, the lessons, and the people who believed in the vision. I'm not saying it's been all sunshine and rainbows. There have been plenty of times when I doubted myself and questioned whether I could make it. There were moments when I thought I'd hit a dead end and that I was out of ideas. But I kept pushing forward because I knew that the hardest moments often lead to the biggest breakthroughs. The key was perseverance, staying flexible, and being willing to adapt to change. Looking back, I realized that starting my business wasn't just about making money. It was about proving to myself and to the world that I could take a crazy idea and turn it into something real. I learned more about myself than I ever expected, and while the financial success has been rewarding, the personal growth has been even more valuable. To anyone thinking about starting their own business, my advice is simple. Start small, fail often, and keep learning. Don't let the fear of failure stop you, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that every setback is just another step towards success. And most importantly, never give up on your vision, no matter how impossible it may seem at the beginning. I'm living proof that if you keep going, even when it feels like the world is against you, you can achieve things beyond your wildest dreams. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I was always the type of person who thought success came in the form of a big break, some lucky moment when everything finally clicked into place. But looking back, I realize now that my journey wasn't about a single moment. It was about countless little decisions, mistakes, and hard lessons. It all started when I was fresh out of college, bright-eyed and filled with dreams of making it big. I'd studied business, convinced that a degree in that field would be my ticket to the top. I had visions of starting a company, becoming the next Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg. But after graduation, reality hit hard. The job market wasn't kind, and I ended up working at a small marketing agency that barely paid enough to cover rent, let alone any of my student loans. I wasn't the only one struggling. The agency had been going through tough times, and it showed in everything from the office's dismal decor to the never-ending pile of unpaid invoices. One evening, after a particularly brutal meeting with the boss, I sat in my car, staring at the dim lights of the city around me. The thought crossed my mind, this isn't how I imagined it. I'm just going to be another cog in the machine, working for someone else's dream. That night, something clicked. I realized I was wasting my time, working for a company that didn't care about me or my potential. I needed to create my own future. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I couldn't just sit around waiting for the right opportunity to fall into my lap. So, I started planning. I didn't know it then, but that night marked the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. The first step was finding a side hustle. I had no money to start a business, but I had skills that could be monetized. I had learned a bit about social media marketing while working at the agency, and I thought maybe I could offer freelance services. The only problem was that I had zero experience doing it independently, and no one knew who I was. So, I started small. I reached out to small businesses in my area, offering discounted services in exchange for testimonials and referrals. At first, it was slow. I made a few dollars here and there, but nothing to write home about. But I didn't give up. I spent every free hour I had learning about the industry, reading blogs, watching videos, and experimenting with different strategies. Slowly but surely, I started to gain more clients, and my reputation began to grow. I started landing bigger projects, and eventually, I took the plunge and left my full-time job. It wasn't easy. I was living on a shoestring budget, working from coffee shops, and doing everything I could to keep the business afloat. There were times when I thought about giving up, but something kept me going. Maybe it was the desire to prove to myself that I could do it, or maybe it was the hope that one day I could build something that would make a real difference. One of the hardest lessons I learned early on was the importance of cash flow. In the beginning, I made the mistake of focusing too much on acquiring new clients and not enough on managing my finances. I wasn't tracking my expenses properly, and I didn't have a clear understanding of how much money was coming in versus going out. At one point, I found myself almost completely out of cash, struggling to pay my bills and keep the lights on. That's when I learned the importance of building a financial cushion. I had to change my entire approach to business. I started setting aside a percentage of every payment I received, ensuring that I had enough to cover lean times. I also became more strategic about my pricing and payment terms, offering longer contracts to ensure more stable cash flow. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. As my business grew, so did the challenges. I had to hire employees, deal with contractors, and navigate the complexities of taxes and regulations. I remember the first time I had to sit down with an accountant to talk about taxes. I had no idea what I was doing. I was nervous, unsure of what to expect. But that meeting turned out to be a game changer. It taught me the importance of having the right team around you, people who can guide you through the complexities of running a business. I wasn't just a freelancer anymore. I was a business owner. The turning point for me came when I was faced with the decision of scaling up. I had reached a point where I was juggling multiple clients and projects, but I was also overwhelmed. I couldn't keep up with everything on my own, and the quality of my work was starting to suffer. I decided to take a leap of faith and hire my first full-time employee. It was terrifying. I had no idea if I could afford to pay someone else, but I knew I couldn't do it all alone. I started by hiring someone to help with the day-to-day operations, someone to handle the admin work and free up my time so I could focus on growing the business. It paid off. With the help of my new team member, I was able to land even bigger clients and expand my offerings. But there was still a lot I didn't know. I had to learn how to manage people, how to delegate, and how to build a company culture that encouraged collaboration and innovation. Fast forward a few years, and my business had grown into something I could be proud of. I had a team of talented individuals who were as passionate about the work as I was, and we were consistently delivering results for our clients. But I wasn't satisfied. I realized that I had fallen into the trap of chasing money and growth without thinking about the bigger picture. That's when I decided to shift my focus. Instead of just building a business for the sake of profit, I wanted to build a company that could make a real difference. I started working with nonprofit organizations, offering my services at discounted rates to help them achieve their goals. It was incredibly rewarding, and it gave me a sense of purpose that I hadn't experienced before. Looking back, I can see that the journey wasn't about finding a quick way to get rich. It was about building something meaningful, learning from my mistakes, and growing as a person and an entrepreneur. I didn't get here overnight, and I didn't do it alone. The lessons I learned along the way were invaluable. They taught me the importance of persistence, the need for a financial cushion, and the value of having the right team around me. But most of all, they taught me that success isn't about waiting for a big break. It's about showing up every day, putting in the work, and making things happen, no matter how hard it gets. I still have a long way to go, but I'm proud of what I've built so far. And I know that the journey is far from over. I never thought I'd be a successful entrepreneur. Growing up, I had a pretty ordinary life. 2 parents who worked hard, a small apartment in a bustling city, and a dream to do something big, something impactful. But it wasn't until I was at rock bottom that I found the courage to take the plunge. I was in my late 20s, working a dead-end job at a call center. The kind of job where you answer the phone, read the script, and pray the day would end soon. The pay wasn't terrible, but the stress was unreal. I was burnt out, and every morning I woke up dreading the thought of having to drag myself to work again. I felt like I was wasting my time and potential. But things got worse. One fateful Friday morning, I got a call from my mom. "I don't want to worry you, but your dad's been diagnosed with cancer. They say it's serious." My world crumbled. I hadn't expected it to hit so hard. My parents weren't old, and I always thought I had more time before something like this happened. I wasn't sure how to handle it, but it felt like the universe was telling me to get my act together. I did the usual thing most people do when faced with tragedy: go into work mode. I spent more hours at the office to distract myself from the pain, but my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't engaged. I just couldn't shake the thought that my life was on autopilot, and it wasn't going anywhere meaningful. My dad's illness woke me up to the reality that life could change in an instant, and I wasn't living in a way that truly mattered. That's when I started thinking about what I really wanted. I'd been a gamer for years, and during my free time, I played games and streamed on Twitch. It wasn't a big deal, just a hobby. But I had built a small following and was starting to get a few donations. I had a handful of subscribers who seemed to enjoy my content. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was something. One night, while streaming a new game release, I had an epiphany. Why not turn this passion into something more? So, I did what most people wouldn't dare to do. I quit my job. I didn't have much saved up, but I had a bit of a cushion and some momentum from my Twitch account. It was the scariest decision of my life, but deep down, I knew I couldn't keep living this way. I took a leap of faith. At first, things were slow. I didn't make much money from streaming, but I started experimenting with other forms of content creation, YouTube videos, podcasting, and social media. Slowly, my followers grew, and so did my ideas. I wanted to create something bigger, something that wasn't just about me, but about the entire gaming community. So, I started an online store selling gaming gear and accessories. It was modest at first, just a small Shopify store. I sold things like custom controllers, t-shirts with funny slogans, and gaming headsets. But here's the thing about starting a business. It's never as easy as you think it will be. The first few months were brutal. I spent hours learning about marketing, SEO, and how to build an online brand. I worked late into the night, sometimes forgetting to eat. I had to juggle between content creation, handling customer service, and trying to get the word out about my store. I didn't have a team, no investors, just me and my hustle. There were days when I wanted to quit. I'd check my sales and see that I had made $50 for the entire week. My parents didn't understand why I wasn't looking for a real job. The pressure was intense. I was losing sleep, battling self-doubt, and wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But then, a breakthrough came. I had been promoting a new line of custom gaming accessories on my social media. I sent a few influencers free products, hoping they'd share them with their audiences. One of the influencers, with 1 million+ followers, posted a picture with my gear. That single post generated hundreds of sales in just a few hours. I couldn't believe it. That's when I realized the power of social proof and influencer marketing. It was a turning point for my business. The orders started to pour in, and I reinvested every penny into expanding my product line, improving my website, and hiring a small team to help with the growing demand. I started to get more creative, offering limited edition collaborations with game developers and streamers. Things began to snowball. Months later, I partnered with a well-known gaming brand to launch a co-branded line of merchandise. The partnership helped catapult my business into new heights. I was now not just a content creator, but the owner of a legitimate company. My earnings from the business quickly surpassed anything I had ever made at my old job. It was surreal, but it wasn't just about the money. What made the difference was the sense of fulfillment. I was doing something I loved, something that had purpose. I was now helping other gamers, creators, and entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. The feedback I received from my community was overwhelming. They were excited to wear my brand, to support something that was born from passion and dedication. The hardest part of the journey wasn't the long hours or the fear of failure. It was the moment I realized I had to take responsibility for every decision I made. I had to learn leadership and manage a growing team. I had to face the challenges of scaling a business. But each step forward was a new lesson in resilience and growth. Today, I run a successful business, and my content creation is bigger than ever. I get to travel to gaming conventions, collaborate with incredible creators, and work on projects I'm genuinely passionate about. But it wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always glamorous. There were times when I thought I would fail, when I wondered if my decision to leave my job was a huge mistake. Looking back, I realized it wasn't about the business or the money. It was about choosing myself. It was about taking control of my destiny and not letting fear dictate my life. I've learned that the most rewarding thing in life is to take risks and chase what truly excites you, even when the odds are against you. I've also learned that success isn't just about financial gains. It's about the impact you make, the people you meet along the way, and the growth you experience on your journey. My dad's illness was a wake-up call. It pushed me to stop living in fear and to take that leap. And now, I'm not just living for myself. I'm living for the vision I created. And that vision keeps evolving, just like the gaming world I'm a part of. If you're thinking of making a big change or taking a risk, my advice is simple. Do it. Even if it scares you. Even if the future feels uncertain. You won't know what you're truly capable of until you take the plunge. The journey will be hard, but it will be worth it. And if I can do it, so can you. I was 24 when I decided to quit my corporate job and start my own business. Up until that point, I had been stuck in a typical 9 to 5 grind. working as a junior marketing associate for a tech firm in downtown Chicago. On the surface, everything seemed fine. I had a decent paycheck, a small but loyal group of friends, and weekends free to enjoy my life. But something inside me was eating away at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for more. Every day I would go to work, sit at my desk, and churn out the same emails, social media campaigns, and market analysis reports. It was safe. It was predictable, but it wasn't fulfilling. I would often find myself daydreaming about something different, something bigger. But every time the thought of starting my own business entered my mind, I would quickly shut it down. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the money. And most importantly, I didn't know where to start. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was one of those slow days in the office when my boss called me into his office for a chat. He handed me a pile of reports outlining our department's quarterly results. The numbers were solid, but not great. The company had high expectations, and I could tell my boss was stressed about it. He didn't have the patience for any mistakes, and any suggestion of creative thinking was often met with resistance. You've been here long enough to know the routine. Keep doing what you're doing, but don't rock the boat, he said with a stiff smile. That was the final straw for me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been living my life for someone else's approval, following a set path that was not my own. My soul felt suffocated by the idea that this would be my life forever. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table and wrote a list of all the things I was passionate about. It was an attempt to identify what I truly wanted. I had always been interested in wellness and healthy living. For years, I'd experimented with different diets, fitness routines, and mindfulness practices. I had spent hours reading books on self-improvement and had even started a small Instagram account where I shared tips and advice on how to live a balanced lifestyle. It was something I loved, but never took seriously. As I sat there, scrolling through my Instagram feed, it dawned on me. This could be my business. I could build something around wellness and help others live healthier, more fulfilling lives. It was the one thing that had always lit me up, and yet I had never fully pursued it. Now was my chance. The next morning, I handed in my resignation letter. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew one thing. I was tired of playing it safe. I didn't want to wake up in 10 years with the same regrets, working for someone else's dream instead of my own. I'll be honest, the first few months were a struggle. I didn't have any business experience, and the idea of building a brand from scratch was intimidating. I didn't even know how to register my business or what kind of legal structure I needed. It felt like I was walking in the dark, hoping I wouldn't trip over something. But I was determined. I started researching everything I could about starting a wellness business. I spent countless hours reading blogs, watching YouTube tutorials, and joining online communities. Slowly, the pieces started to come together. I learned about the importance of having a clear vision, building a website, and creating a consistent brand. I even took a few online courses on digital marketing and social media to build the skills I would need to grow my business. One of the biggest challenges I faced early on was deciding what my product offering would be. I knew I wanted to help people, but I wasn't sure how to translate my passion into something that would be valuable to others. After much trial and error, I decided to start small by creating a line of personalized wellness journals. They were a combination of a daily planner, goal tracker, and mindfulness journal, designed to help people stay focused and motivated as they work toward their health goals. It wasn't an immediate hit. I spent my nights packaging and shipping orders from my apartment, often finding myself overwhelmed and exhausted. But little by little, I started gaining traction. People were responding to my product, and word of mouth began to spread. I launched an online store, began promoting my journals on Instagram, and started building an email list. Slowly, I began to see the results of my hard work. Within a year, my business had grown beyond my wildest expectations. I had a team of 3 employees, a warehouse to handle inventory, and a loyal customer base that continued to grow. I expanded my product line to include wellness coaching, fitness challenges, and digital resources like meal plans and workout guides. I even started a podcast where I interviewed other entrepreneurs in the wellness space, which helped me build credibility and connect with an even larger audience. But, of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were times when I doubted myself. The imposter syndrome would creep in, and I would wonder if I was cut out for this. There were setbacks, mistakes, and moments where I felt like giving up. But each time I faced a challenge, I reminded myself why I started. I remembered the frustration I had felt at my corporate job and the hunger I had for something more meaningful. That kept me going, even when things felt tough. One of the most memorable moments was when I received an email from a customer thanking me for helping them transform their life. They told me how my journal had helped them stay on track with their fitness goals and how they had lost 30 pounds in the past 6 months. That email was a game changer. It reminded me that the work I was doing was making a real difference in people's lives. Now, looking back, I realized that taking the leap into entrepreneurship was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy. It required sacrifice, hard work, and a willingness to learn from my mistakes. But the rewards have been worth it. I've built a successful business that allows me to help others while doing something I'm truly passionate about. If there's one thing I've learned throughout this journey, it's that the fear of failure is often what holds us back. We get so caught up in worrying about what could go wrong that we forget to focus on what could go right. If I had let fear dictate my decisions, I would still be stuck in that corporate job, dreaming of a different life. But by taking that leap of faith, I've created a life that I'm proud of, and I wouldn't change it for anything. My journey into entrepreneurship began in the most unlikely way. Growing up in a small town with limited opportunities, I never imagined that one day I'd own a successful business. In fact, my family wasn't well off, and I didn't even have a clear idea of what I wanted to do when I grew up. But there was always one thing I knew for sure. I hated the idea of working for someone else for the rest of my life. So, I set out to create something of my own. After high school, I didn't immediately jump into college. I worked odd jobs, fast food, retail, you name it. They were all terrible, but they gave me some real-world experience. I didn't learn much about business from those jobs, but I did learn how not to treat people, which would end up being more valuable than anything else. I didn't have a college degree, and that was a hurdle in itself. I remember scrolling through job listings on job boards, seeing all these jobs that required degrees, experience, and fancy qualifications. It felt like a locked door that I couldn't get through. But something inside me just refused to settle. I knew that if I couldn't find a way into the traditional workforce, I'd have to build my own path. I had a bit of money saved up, thanks to the odd jobs, and I decided to take the plunge into a small business venture. My first idea was simple, a local cleaning service. It didn't require much capital, and I figured I could build it from the ground up, one customer at a time. What I lacked in expertise, I made up for in hustle and determination. I started by reaching out to neighbors and offering my services. I did everything, vacuuming, scrubbing, and even taking out the trash. Anything to prove that I was committed to doing a good job. The pay was terrible at first, but I didn't mind. I knew that I needed to build a reputation. After a few months, the word started spreading. People liked my work, and I gained some regular clients. But the breakthrough came when I decided to invest in better equipment. I bought a high-end vacuum cleaner and a set of industrial cleaning tools. These tools made my job easier and faster, which allowed me to take on more clients. However, there was a big problem. I had no idea how to run a business. Sure, I knew how to clean, but I didn't know how to keep track of finances, manage time, or market myself effectively. This lack of knowledge led to some painful mistakes. I remember once miscalculating my taxes, and the IRS came after me for it. It was a mess. I spent hours trying to figure out how to resolve the issue, all the while realizing how much I didn't know about running a business. I was in a tough spot. I didn't want to quit, but I was on the verge of it. I didn't have a mentor or anyone to turn to, and I felt like I was floundering. But something kept me going, a small spark of belief that I could turn things around. I decided to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. I couldn't just be a cleaner. I had to become a business owner. So, I started reading business books, watching online tutorials, and attending local small business seminars. Slowly but surely, I began to learn the ins and outs of running a company. I learned about marketing, customer service, and the importance of maintaining a strong brand. The most important lesson I learned was to focus on customer relationships. It's not just about providing a service, it's about providing an experience. I made sure to go above and beyond for my clients, offering little touches like leaving a handwritten thank you note after each job. The results were immediate. My clients started referring me to their friends, and my reputation grew. After a year or so, I was able to hire my first employee, and that's when things really started to change. Now, instead of doing all the work myself, I could delegate tasks and focus on growing the business. I also started implementing better systems for tracking finances, scheduling jobs, and handling client communication. But the real game changer came when I started offering specialized services. I added eco-friendly cleaning options and pet-friendly services, which attracted a new clientele. I also created packages for regular clients, making it easier for them to book recurring services. The combination of niche services and convenience helped me stand out in a crowded market. As the business grew, I reinvested the profits into more equipment, better marketing, and higher quality cleaning supplies. I also upgraded my website to make it more user-friendly, adding an online booking system and client reviews. Slowly but surely, the business became more professional. Eventually, I reached a point where I was no longer just cleaning homes. I was managing a team of employees, handling logistics, and making strategic decisions for the future of the company. I had gone from being a one-person operation to running a legitimate business with multiple employees. In hindsight, the biggest turning point wasn't when I bought the better equipment or started offering specialized services. It was when I stopped thinking like a cleaner and started thinking like a business owner. I learned how to scale, how to delegate, and how to build a brand that people trusted. Fast forward to today, and I've expanded the business into a full-fledged cleaning company with multiple branches across the state. I've got over 50 employees, and our clients range from small homeowners to large corporations. I still remember the early days when I was scraping by, trying to figure out how to pay my bills. Now, I'm running a six-figure business, and I've got more clients than I know what to do with. But even though my business is successful, I never forget where I came from. I still work closely with my team, and I make sure that customer satisfaction is always at the forefront of everything we do. It's not just about the money. It's about making people's lives easier and leaving a lasting impact on their homes and businesses. If I've learned one thing through all of this, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It's the result of hard work, persistence, and constantly learning from your mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, but every single one of them has been a lesson that has helped me grow as both a person and an entrepreneur. I still get emails from people asking me how I built my business, and my answer is always the same. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. It might be messy at first, but if you keep pushing through the hard times and learn from your failures, you'll eventually get to where you want to be. It's not easy. It never will be. But if you're willing to put in the work, stay focused, and be adaptable, you can build something that lasts. And that's exactly what I've done. I always knew I wanted to start my own business, but I never imagined the path it would take. It wasn't a smooth ride, not by a long shot. There were plenty of twists, turns, and moments when I felt like throwing in the towel. But here's the story of how I went from a broke college grad to building a six-figure business from the ground up. It all started in my final year of college. I was studying marketing and had big dreams of one day owning a company. I'd read a lot of success stories about entrepreneurs, and they all seemed to have a pattern. They were risk takers, creative, and unafraid to fail. But there was one thing that kept holding me back: money. Like most college students, I had no savings, and the idea of taking out loans to fund a business seemed terrifying. During my senior year, I worked as an intern at a small digital marketing agency. The job was barely paying me anything, but I learned a lot about SEO, social media, and paid ads. This experience made me realize that there was a huge opportunity in the digital space, especially for small businesses that didn't have the budget to hire large marketing agencies. I began toying with the idea of starting my own digital marketing consultancy. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the thought of helping small businesses thrive by leveraging the power of online marketing excited me. The problem was, I had no clue where to start. I didn't have any real connections in the business world, and I definitely didn't have the funds to hire anyone to help me get started. So, I decided to take a very unconventional route. I would bootstrap everything. The first step was building a website. I had no web development skills, but I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials on WordPress and learning how to design a simple, clean website. It wasn't anything fancy, but it got the job done. Next, I focused on building a personal brand. I started posting valuable marketing tips on LinkedIn and Instagram, just to show people that I knew what I was talking about. It took months before I landed my first client, and I was thrilled. The client was a small e-commerce store that sold handmade jewelry. They had a terrible website, no social media presence, and their sales were stagnant. I told them that with the right strategies, I could help them turn things around. They were hesitant at first, but after a long meeting, they decided to take a chance on me. The first few weeks were grueling. I worked 16-hour days trying to improve their website, optimize their product pages for SEO, and create a social media strategy. I barely slept, but I was determined to prove myself. Slowly, things started to click. Their website traffic increased, their social media engagement skyrocketed, and after just 3 months, their sales had nearly doubled. I was ecstatic. This success was my proof of concept. I had shown that I could take a struggling business and turn it into a profitable one. Word started spreading. More small businesses began reaching out to me for help. I had a few solid clients, but I was still a one-man operation, and there were only so many hours in a day. I knew that to scale, I needed to hire a team, but there was one huge problem: I couldn't afford it. I was stuck in a difficult spot. I knew that hiring was essential for growth, but I didn't want to risk everything on a team I couldn't afford. So, I did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. I took on a huge risk. I started outsourcing tasks to freelancers. I would work with contractors on a project-by-project basis. This allowed me to scale the business without committing to long-term salaries. It was risky, but it worked. Slowly, I built a network of reliable freelancers who helped me take on more work without draining my savings. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. I ran into some serious challenges along the way. One of my biggest hurdles came when I decided to invest in paid advertising. I had never run ads before, but I figured it was time to take the leap. I had a small budget, so I started with Facebook ads. Long story short, I lost a lot of money. The ads didn't convert, and I ended up with a lot of frustrated clients. I realized that I needed to take a step back and educate myself on advertising. I enrolled in online courses, watched endless webinars, and tested different strategies. It was tough, but it paid off. I finally got my ad campaigns to a place where they were generating a positive return on investment. I also got better at understanding the psychology behind consumer behavior, which made me a more effective marketer overall. By the time I hit my second year of business, things were starting to click. I had a steady stream of clients, a team of freelancers I trusted, and a better understanding of how to market my services. But the road wasn't without its bumps. There were months when business slowed down, and I feared that everything would fall apart. But I kept pushing through. The turning point came when I decided to create my first digital product, an online course on how to grow a small business with digital marketing. I had always been hesitant to create a product because I didn't want to seem like a guru. But after receiving countless inquiries from people asking for advice, I decided it was time to give it a shot. I spent months creating the course, pouring everything I knew into it. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but it paid off. The course took off. I started generating passive income, which allowed me to invest more in the business and hire full-time employees. With the additional revenue, I was able to upgrade my systems, invest in better tools, and ultimately scale the business to a level I had only dreamed of. By my third year, my consultancy had reached 6 figures in revenue. I had a team of dedicated employees, and I was finally in a position to enjoy the fruits of my labor. But I never forgot where I came from. The struggle, the sleepless nights, and the constant fear of failure shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. I learned that success doesn't come overnight. It's a long, messy, and often painful process, but if you're willing to stick with it, the rewards are worth it. Now, looking back, I realized that the real key to my success wasn't just marketing skills or the ability to build a website. It was perseverance. Every time I faced a setback, I found a way to move forward. Every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. So, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, my advice is simple: don't give up. The road will be tough, and you'll have moments where you question whether it's all worth it. But keep pushing forward. The struggle will make you stronger, and the reward will be sweeter than you can imagine. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.